Welcome to the Voices That Propel Us, stories of justice, action, and community, a space where justice meets action and community voices rise. Each episode, we bring you stories from the front lines, changemakers, disruptors, and everyday heroes who are building a more just, equitable, and liberated world. This is more than a podcast. It's a call to listen, learn, and move together. You were just listening to music from the incredibly talented Stephen Kong. You can find him on Spotify and Bandcamp. Today we have with us Maxwell Ivey. Known as a blind blogger, Maxwell Ivey is a serial online entrepreneur with almost 2 decades experience educating people about the need for and benefits of improving accessibility. He has been working with clients for 5 years, including serving as accessibility advisor to PodMatch. He has been published in Consumer Reports, writes a regular column for PHP Architect called Barrier Free Bytes, and regularly shares his knowledge with online publications. He also has a great origin story of going from Carnival owner to amusement park and Carnival ride broker, to life goals coach, and to podcast guest booker before finding his perfect place in accessibility. He can share the tools that have allowed him to keep going for so many years, including interdependence, self-determination, determined positivity, honest storytelling, and the value of continuing to move forward. He has also overcome his fear of singing in public and has written original songs, which he often sings during his podcasts, when being interviewed, or when doing public speaking. As founder of the Accessibility Advantage, his message is that accessibility isn't just about compliance. It's about reputation, innovation, and growth. Well, hello. I'm really excited to have you on today. I think you do incredible work, have such a powerful story. I'm really grateful that you reached out to me. But how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. How are you doing?
Good. I'm excited to have this conversation with you and, just love to learn more about what you've done. So, just starting off, you've described your journey as moving from a failed Carnival owner to accessibility advisor. So what moments or turning points most shaped that evolution for you?
Right. Well, the first moment was obviously not of my control or doing, and I would have preferred not to go through it, but in 2003, my dad passed away, and by 2006, I could see that our Carnival business was going to be going out of business, and I needed to figure out what to do next. And I decided to help other people sell their surplus rides because I had to do it for my own family. And once I decided I was going to do that, people said I had to have a website. And so in order to build the website, it turned out that the only way for a blind person to do that in 2007 was to learn HTML. So I taught myself to code and built the website. And then people told me I had to have a blog. And as you know, with an online business, it's never ending. There's always something new you got to do, like recruiting clients and setting fees and writing copy and managing media. And so as I did the next thing, people started telling me how inspiring I was to show how I took on these difficult challenges. And they asked me to share more about being a blind entrepreneur, which I did under the name The Blind Blogger, which was a name people had been using for me on social media, because back then most people with a disability were hiding their disability. And since I was open about mine, I became the blind blogger. So from there, I first tried being a coach, and people didn't want me to be their coach. They wanted me to show them how to get on podcasts and other publicity opportunities. So I did that for a while. And then in 2019, I was at PodFest speaking in the Pichacucha section, which is a short form where each person does 5 minutes on one topic. My topic was interdependence, or asking for help and accepting help when offered. And after my talk, Alex Sanfilippo from PodMatch followed me out into the lobby and said he had to meet me, that he was really impressed with my talk, and I cover a subject in a way nobody had ever done before. And we've been friends since. So in 2021, when he started PodMatch, he invited me to share my thoughts on a volunteer basis, and then later on he hired me, and now I'm on the advisory board for PodMatch.com to make sure that they are accessible to people of all abilities. Along the same time, AudioEye.com, which is an enterprise-level accessibility firm, persuaded me to go to work for them as a content contributor and eventually as a quality assurance contractor. I say talk me into it because when they first told me they had a job for me, I tried to talk them out of it. I didn't believe that I was qualified to do what they wanted. But after 4 interviews and the COO basically telling me that I had the ability to share ideas with people in a way that were understood, that would go through to people's minds as they were reading, watching, or listening to what I had to say. And so that was a great experience. And basically over time, for the last 5 years, there's been more opportunities to share my knowledge and experience about accessibility. And I've finally come to accept the fact that the almost 20 years I've been out here online, quite often having to advocate for accessibility or at least for accommodation so that I could use whatever company's website or app so I could accomplish the goal of the moment, has given me a lot of lived experience and makes me an expert that a lot of people will want to take advantage of. So I started out to be a Carnival owner. That's all I ever wanted to be. When that stopped, I did the ride broking because it was the only thing I thought I could do. Over time, I learned that I could do many more things. The life coaching didn't work out. The podcast booking was going well, but the world and God had better or different plans for me. So here I am now in my 5th iteration of Max Ivey, and we'll see. Hopefully this is what I'm going to be doing from now on, just maybe expanding it and getting clearer on my message and influencing more people to adopt accessibility because they've learned that it's in their best interest, and I've been somewhat responsible for teaching them to understand that.
Wow, that's so wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. That's such a beautiful journey that you had. And, I'd love to talk with you more about your identity as the blind blogger. So with that, in June 2014, you stepped fully into the identity of the blind blogger. So what did that decision do for you?
Right. Well, since you have done the research most people haven't, and you actually have the date, I think I need to mention exactly what caused me to start the website, because people had been calling me the blind blogger for a couple of years. Okay. People had been telling me I was inspiring them and I motivated them, and people were already saying, if Max can do it, then what's my excuse? But I just didn't really see myself as an inspiration. So a good friend of mine finally explained it to me. Her name is Adrienne Smith. I call her my blogging mama. She taught me everything I know about blog commenting to build relationships, to use your blog for marketing. And she finally says, Max, the thing is you have a built-in excuse. If you decided you wanted to sit on your couch and eat junk food and watch TV, nobody would ever say anything bad about you for doing so. Right. She said the fact that you have an excuse and don't use it when so many people out there in the world are basically sleepwalking through their days without the challenges you have. She said, that's what makes you inspirational. So I finally understood that. At the same time, I got a really lucky break. And of course, I know they say that luck goes to the ones who are making the effort. That's not the quote I know, but a friend of mine named Harlena Singh had started a new website called Aha Now, and I think it's still out there, aha-now.com. And she wanted people to try out her new community-based website and make sure it worked. Well, whenever somebody says that, I'm usually one of the first to go, well, let's see if it works, but also let's see if it works for somebody using a screen reader. Well, she announced she would give away a guest blog post to whoever was the most active during the first month of the website. And I turned out to be the most active user. And so I got that opportunity, and we went back and forth on it. She's from India, and obviously I live in Houston, Texas, in the U.S. So we were having this intense back and forth discussion about my blog post. every time I sent her an update, she was like, "No, Max, you can go deeper than this. You can be more honest than this. You can really put yourself out there." So we finally got the post, and it was published. It's called "Life Lessons from a Blind Blogger."
Okay.
And the post got an incredible amount of response. I'm not going to say it went viral because it didn't by viral standards, but it got over 100 comments. And I wish I could save the comments so I could read them every so often when I need to. But I saved the article, and
Right.
that was like a validation. Okay, of you need to stop messing around and go ahead and do this. So that was the impetus when I finally filed for the domain name. But a funny thing happened when I did finally say I was going to be the blind blogger. I had some friends, both sighted and visually impaired, that were not happy with me, and a few even stopped associating with me online. And it was kind of a weird breakdown. My sighted friends thought, the ones that were upset, they thought that I was too talented to be leaning on the quote blind card, unquote. And the visually impaired people that were upset about me, they were like, Max, why do you have to use the quote blind card, unquote, to build your brand? So I had to explain. I tried to explain to them that it wasn't my doing. I didn't pick the name or ask for the name. The name was given to me.
Okay.
But that was a result of doing that. And then since you have the date when my blog first went, you are probably also aware of the fact that the first post on that website was one of those happy accidents where the post didn't turn out exactly the way it was planned to be, but the results were really cool.
Can you explain more about that? What was that post about?
Okay, so the post is titled, "I Think I'm Ready to Be an Inspiration."
Wow, I love that.
Yes, I think I'm ready. Okay, now, at the time, I was still doing a lot of work on helping people sell surplus amusement rides. And occasionally I will still help somebody because I believe in helping the small business owners that are in that industry so that they can have somebody ethical to help them find new homes for equipment they no longer need. At the time, though, I'm working on this new listing for this gorgeous amusement park train. This guy in Canada had taken this train and he had restored it the way automobile aficionados restore it. It looked better than it did when it was new, I am sure. So the same time I'm posting about, I think I'm ready to be an inspiration, I'm also on my other website, I'm posting about this train. Right. And I got the pictures mixed up. So the picture of me, the picture of me that I wanted to go with that first blog post ended up on the post for the train that was for sale. And the picture of the engine of the train ended up on the post titled, "I Think I'm Ready to Be an Inspiration." So,
I love that though. What was the result of that though?
You would have been in the majority then because about a third of the people who saw it said, "Max, you messed this up. You need to fix this." But a lot of people said, "Max, we remember the little engine that could, and we, like the idea of you saying, 'I think I can,' or 'I think I am ready.' And we hope that you don't take it down or change it." So I've left it up, and it's become one of my favorite public speaking and podcasting stories. Yeah. Because, it's quite often, as I'm sure you are aware, the things that don't turn out exactly the way we plan tend to be some of the most impactful and some of those that get the largest audiences.
Yeah, no, that's so beautiful. I really love that. Thank you for sharing that story too. And so you chose visibility at a time when many people with disabilities were encouraged to stay hidden. So what fears were you pushing through in that moment? And, I think it just takes a lot of courage. And I feel like because you did that, it probably gave other people courage to, speak about their stories as well.
Right. Well, one of the things that's a big part of my brand is honesty. And so I have to honestly say, I just didn't think about it. At the time I started doing it, I had some pushback from a couple of people, but I really didn't see that as systemic, as a big problem. It's just, a few people didn't like the idea. And You have to remember, I come from Carnival people. And so,
Okay.
the idea of promoting yourself, of putting yourself out in the world is as natural as breathing. So I really just didn't think about it at the time. And to be also continue to be honest, I didn't really understand what I was doing or the impact that I have had over time until back in March of last year when I went to speak at CSUN.
Okay.
I was selected to give a talk titled 40 Years of Adaptive Technology, What Does the Future Hold? And the people at AudioEye decided to sponsor me. So the whole week I'm surrounded by them along with many other people that have been openly, vigorously, passionately advocating for accessibility much longer than I have.
Okay.
And one of them took me aside and said, Max, as the blind blogger, you were a trailblazer. And I go, what do you mean I was a trailblazer? And she said, you were one of the very few people with a disability 15 years ago that was out there openly disabled, openly sharing your content as somebody living with vision loss. And you really should take credit, at least some credit, for the fact that we now live in an online world where people can openly express their disabilities or their physical, mental, or emotional challenges. And she said, just think about all those websites now where the name of the company or the tagline of the company includes some reference to disability. Or how many people are using emojis, stickers, and GIFs in their daily conversation that show that they are openly living with a disability. She said, and that was Mariella Paulino from AudioEye, who is one of these people. She has been advocating for people, for deaf people, people with hearing disabilities for probably 20 years now, it seems. So, but she was the one who explained it to me. And once she explained it to me, I'm like, I'm probably not going to be easy to live with once I actually digest this and come around to believing it in my own mind, but yeah, back then, I was happy I didn't have to come up with a brand name because brand names are hard. And the fact that people basically gave me a name. Yeah. And when I tried not to take the name, it was like, what else are you going to call yourself? And so it stuck and I did the work. And really pretty much all the only name that I have online besides my own name, Maxwell Ivey, that I actually had anything to do with picking is the Accessibility Advantage. And in that case, I wish I could say I did the ChatGPT myself, but I was still a little scared of it 2 years or so ago. But I asked a friend to run it through ChatGPT for me, and I told him, he said, make a list of everything that you feel embodies your message, and I did, and I sent it to him, and he sent it back, and he said, well, Max, it says your message is Accessibility Advantage. He said, but you can't get that domain name. So the website, theaccessibilityadvantage.com. But my first website, Midway Marketplace, people online at an amusement park started calling me Mr. Midway, and it stuck. There's the no excuses stuff. There's the what's your excuse stuff. There's the blind blogger. I didn't build none of that or ask for it or come up with it. I just said thank you and did the work.
Wow. No, thank you for sharing that. So you talk about accessibility as an advantage and not a burden. So what gets lost when accessibility is framed just as a legal requirement?
Right. Well, I wish I could remember which one of my guests was that explained it to me this way, but I recently got a great example on when accessibility is approached from the point of view of compliance or fear of some sort of penalty. She said, Max, when I tell my kids they have to clean their room or else, they will clean the room, but if I go look, I'm going to find clothes under the bed, toys jammed into the closet, and who knows what else I'll find I don't want to find. She said, but if I can get them to understand the benefits of cleaning the room, such as they'll actually be able to find their own stuff when they look for it instead of asking me to look for it. She said, then I get a clean room. And I've been trying to, that's a lot about, accessibility, because when people approach it from fear-based, and a lot of the large businesses out there, they will do the bare minimum. Quite often they will do it poorly. Quite often, they will not pay attention to accessibility that is broken in updates or upgrades.
Okay.
Or, there's just a lot of problems with approaching it from the point of fear and compliance and regulation. And the other part of it is there are really just so many good reasons for people to embrace accessibility that we don't talk about enough.
Uh-huh.
And most people think I'm going to talk about the size or the cloud of the audience first, but when I do public talks on the subject of why should people care about accessibility, that's the last thing I cover.
Okay. No, I love that.
Because to start with, when you improve accessibility, you improve overall user experience of everybody who doesn't have a disability. And that can be seen through things like dark mode, like breaking forms and other content up into smaller bytes so it can be managed on mobile devices. That there's just so many things that you do to improve accessibility will naturally improve how other people can navigate a website or an app.
Right.
You improve the search engine optimization, and somebody dropped a new one on me yesterday. In addition to SEO, there's now AI.
Okay.
And the artificial intelligence bots, you can definitely influence what they think of your website and who they will drive traffic to you from.
Wow.
Through your accessibility, because as I'm learning more and more, the AI bots are stupid and blind. They have to be educated. And the best way to educate them, the same way as the best way to educate search engines, is through structure, consistency, dedication to labeling. These sorts of things can be quantified by the algorithms, and they can they do definitely reward sites that embrace the minimum accessibility standards. A couple new ones I just learned about is accessible sites load faster. And when you build for accessibility, you create cleaner code, so future updates or upgrades to a website or app take less time and money. A while back, I interviewed an owner of a company who told me that because of their investment in accessibility, they had people who wanted to come to work so they could learn accessibility and put it on their resume. And they had people wanting to come to work because of their social conscious. And he told me they now can compete with much larger companies for talent on things other than pay or benefits. So that's one of those things. It's not necessarily associated with accessibility, but it is out there. And and we, if we want to talk about the audience, one other aspect of the audience I feel like we don't talk about enough that we need to do a better job at is not just the raw numbers, not just the raw dollars, but to focus on the consumer loyalty and the self-advocacy. Those are two really important pieces that we don't talk about much.
Yeah, no, thank you for bringing that up. And, for myself too, I've done work around disability rights, and I've been involved with a lot of different social movements too throughout my, personal life and also my professional career. So how do you think that accessibility intersects with broader social movements?
I'm not really sure. I wish that I could say that it is. I interviewed a woman a few years ago who tried to help me understand that environmentalism and universal design do have a big interaction with each other. But it seems like in all the major movements that people with disabilities and accessibility doesn't seem to be playing a role, but that doesn't mean it isn't. It just means that it's not. It may mean that it's not obvious. But I do wish that more of the activism that has gone into improving the lives of people, of minorities of color or of gender, could also be brought in and affect the lives of people with disabilities. And but it does seem that hasn't happened to me. It hasn't happened as much as it should. The other thing that I think about when we talk about activism with disability and accessibility is the fact that various types of disability groups have a hard time working together, even on issues where we should have an agreement on what the correct outcome is.
Right.
And I really feel that's because we just don't talk to each other enough. And one of the things I really love about my podcast, both of them, What's Your Excuse and the Accessibility Advantage, is they have given me opportunities to talk to people with disabilities that are different from my own, to learn about their lives and their individual challenges that are different than my challenges,
Right.
and to start, building some connections across those fences within the disability community.
No, I really love that. And how do you think that people can be better allies, like people without disabilities being allies with people with disabilities, like beyond just being performative?
Right. Well, I feel like the first thing is for people to really care about those with disabilities that they're exposed to during the course of their daily life, whether we're talking about in person or virtually.
Right.
Because I feel like the one of the best things we can do to improve how people with disabilities are treated is for more people to be exposed to us on a more personal level. So I'd say that would be a good start, because then that gives both parties, the able-bodied person and the disabled person, the opportunity to build connection and relationships. And those are generally more likely to be the kind of contacts where you can have real conversations and you can start to affect change in how people think about others, how they talk to others, and more importantly, how they see the potential of others that aren't exactly like them.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for sharing that. So next, you emphasize interdependence rather than independence. So how do you think that this challenges the dominant ideas about success and productivity in our society?
Right. Well, I think I've gotten to the point where I'm no longer saying interdependence instead of independence, but I really do believe that this focus on uber independence in life in general, but especially within the disability community, are not healthy, because we weren't intended to do the difficult, important things in our lives by ourselves. It's not as much fun when we try to do these things by ourselves. When we allow people to be part of our journey and part of our story, then we can accomplish things more quickly with less strain and more joy. So I definitely believe in it. And I have to credit Tom Sullivan, the international entertainer who happens to be blind, because that's the way he likes people to talk about him. And he wrote a book called Hearing Lessons, Things I Learned in the Dark, and that was the first time I ever heard anybody talk about interdependence.
Okay.
And so I wrote, and it was basically giving voice to something that I had grown up with, because my dad told me growing up to never be afraid to ask for help, and that if I didn't ask for help, there'd be a lot of things I couldn't do at all, and many more it would take me longer if I were to do them at all. So, and over the years online, that has been a really valuable superpower of mine, because, as you know, the world doesn't like to ask for help. They feel bad when they do it. They feel inept, weak. So most people will try to do things by themselves. And sadly, we have a lot of gurus out there who give the impression that they are doing everything they do by themselves, which is total BS. One of the things I love about Gary Vaynerchuk, the influencer, motivational guy, is most of the time when you see him do a video, he's got at least a few of his team in the video with him. And sometimes they even get the mic. So, but, for the most part, the really big personalities come off as if they're doing it all by themselves, which is a big disservice to the world, because a lot of people get it in their heads that if they can't do it by themselves, that there's something wrong with them, which leads to frustration, aggravation, depression, and quite often it leads to somebody quitting because they feel like there must be something wrong with them because they can't do it like the people on TV are doing it, you know.
Right.
So and the other thing is, over the years in the various training programs that I've been through as somebody with vision loss, it was always about independence, about total independence, and even independence for independence sake. And I was actually kind of surprised a few years ago. I did some retraining with an O&M instructor, and we talked about my navigation style, and she said, "You're a problem solver." I said, "Is that a nice way of saying I would rather get assistance from a human than depend on my cane?" And she got a nice laugh out of that.
No, I love that. So next I wanted to talk about storytelling. So you've said that honest storytelling is essential. Can you speak more about that and why you think it's so important?
Right. Well, first off, it's important to know that when I say honest storytelling, I'm talking about not just storytelling to an audience, but also to yourself, because quite often the stories we tell ourselves can affect whether or not we are going to be successful.
Oh, okay, I love that.
But when it comes to telling stories, I just look at my particular path. A lot of people have followed my work, have supported me, have encouraged me, have read what I've written or listened to my podcast or whatever, because they fell in love with my story. And, it's a story of somebody who didn't have all the resources he wanted to, that was making lots of mistakes, but was trying really hard on a daily basis, and still trying really hard on a daily basis to learn and to grow, and to always get better where I can, or accept places where I can't improve or where maybe I shouldn't improve. Sometimes you just have to go, this works great for me. But the storytelling, as you can probably tell from our conversation so far, I'm more likely to tell things to people that most other people might go, I appreciate him saying that. It was funny. It was it was touching, but but if I did it, I would blush because it would embarrass me. So and when it comes to honest storytelling, people have to figure out where their level is. But the really cool thing about it is, the more you tell your stories, the more you tell the new stories, the better you get at it, the more comfortable you get, the more details you will find that you're comfortable sharing with the world. And these stories are how you build a connection between you and people who will probably never meet you in person. At the very best, they may meet you online through Zoom or Skype or something. And we have an opportunity through our stories to be vulnerable, to be honest, to let people see who we are and decide whether or not they like us. And, there's that old thing of know, like, trust. And from trust, then you can go to business, to sales, to some sort of interaction. So I do a really good job of letting people know who I am, who I really am, and not just who I want them to think I am. And most people like me. And one of the most common comments I get is, Max, people like you. They want to help you. They want to work with you. So unfortunately, a lot of people are still being taught that you have to be really careful what you put out into the world.
Right.
And if you're vulnerable, it's going to cost you business. So, and the business people are the worst at it, because they just feel like if they put themselves out there, it's going to cost them. They're not going to be able to generate income from it. So why do it? And but I do my best to give them a good example. And I have a friend in Canada who's been the editor for my books. Her name is Lorraine, regularly at wordingwell.com, and but for a while she wouldn't share her story because she thought, even as an editor and somebody who helped people publish their books, they might not want to work with her. But she's a former prostitute, somebody who was raped at a young age, somebody who still lives in the town where her rapist resides, because there's no mechanism to force him to move. But somebody who did drug abuse, did prostitution, but eventually changed her life, and now she's an award-winning author, a very successful editor, and somebody who, unlike me, is fixing to take a 2-week trip to the Dominican Republic. So I'm not one of those people who takes vacations, but she does. You know?
Okay.
I mean?
Okay. No, that's awesome.
She's come all the way back. You know, I mean,
Right. No, that's cool.
I think I don't take vacations because I used to work pretty much year round, and it's just still a foreign concept to me. But you know, these are things she didn't want to tell people. I convinced her to come on my podcast and talk about it. She's talked about it more and more, and it's led to some opportunities, especially of people wanting to publish memoirs, of people who are now actually seek her out because they're like,
right.
I have a very raw emotional story to tell, and I would actually like an editor who's had to tell that same kind of story of her own. So,
yeah. Okay, cool. No, well, thank you for sharing this. So, I'd love to hear your advice, but for someone who's might be feeling stuck, so this could be due to disability, burnout, or even systemic barriers, what does keep moving forward realistically look like?
Right. Well, basically, if you're doing something that you feel like you're committed to, and sometimes even when you don't, continuing to move forward means continuing to do the work, to get better at the work, to inform yourself so that you can continue to focus on whatever it is. You know, it's one of those challenging things because sometimes we do have to quit, or we do have to pivot.
Right.
And I interviewed a woman a while back, Terry Brown, for my podcast, and I asked her, I said, what about, what do you say when people ask you about, they feel like they need to quit? And she's like, sometimes you do, but she said the most important thing is never quit on a bad day. So for the most part, what can you do today that will move you closer to your goal? Who can you connect with? Who can you reach out to? What resources do you already have that you could be using better? What things can you eliminate from your daily life that would allow you to be more focused or more deliberate in what you're doing? For me, I've done so many different things, and quite often I've tried to do them at the same time, that it's only now I'm really seeing significant progress professionally, and also in the area of income and profitability from my work, because I am focused on just one thing. So I have to thank my friend Alex at PodMatch for that, as well as for being the first person who hired me, because focusing and helping me understand that there are a lot of things that I'm good at, but not a lot of things that I'm genius at. And he actually found a book called Zone of Genius and sent it to me. And if you're one of those people like me that has multiple sources of employment and income, you might want to give it a read, because it really helped me. And apparently we all have zones of incompetence, competence, superiority, and genius. And
that's cool.
I was spending a lot of time. Well, the thing is, over the years, I've had to get good at doing a lot of different things.
Right.
And so, when you do that, you get to a point where you feel like you can do just about anything. Then you have to switch the mindset. Well, yes, I could do just about anything, but does it serve my purpose? For example, I haven't written a new book in a couple of years because I've been doing paid writing and accessibility. And plus, because publishing a book as a blind self-published author requires me to hire several people and pay them, and even at reasonable fees, it's an expensive process for something you don't know what kind of return you're going to get on it. Whereas as somebody who gets contracted to write on accessibility for online publications, that's a much more sustainable arrangement. So while I would love to publish a next book, I'd especially like to do a book on accessibility that's more storytelling than technical requirements. But it's just not a good fit for me right now. But when it comes to, continuing to move forward, finding ways to rediscover love, finding ways to bring in curiosity, finding ways to make things an adventure or an experience. I've mentioned PodMatch several times. They just recently added a new thing that will check your messages to hosts and give you feedback on them. And my first few reviews were not good. And part of me was like, I've been writing emails to podcast hosts since 2013. I know what I'm doing, but then I thought, well, nothing says I can't get better at what I'm doing by reading what the AI bot says and deciding whether or not it really applies to me and going forward. So I'm going to continue to improve, but we're going to talk about continuing to move forward. Some days, you do need to have that internal conversation or conversation with your family about, is this the right path? But most of the time, it is really just about continuing to move forward. In Finding Nemo, Dory said, "Just keep swimming." I did karaoke a few years ago and had some trouble with the karaoke, and so I wrote a post about it titled "Just Keep Singing."
Okay.
And what I learned, the subtitle is "What I Learned from Bad Karaoke." So we just have to keep moving forward. Sometimes we have to change the lane we're in. We have to pivot, but that doesn't mean we've stopped or quit or been defeated or lost or failed. It just means we've found a different path, or we've discovered a new path that is better than the one we were on. And the important thing there, when you do decide to change, is don't disvalue the experiences, the things you learned in that previous road that you were on, because those things did benefit you, and they will definitely serve you in whatever you're going to do next. So I encourage people to keep moving forward, to keep doing what they're doing, unless through contemplation in a positive, healthy way and manner, they've determined that they need to pivot, or they need to quit, or they need to go back to their parents or back to their traditional job or whatever their back to or next to is.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. You really love that. And, I'd love to hear from you. What kind of world do you think becomes possible when accessibility is treated as a shared responsibility? So people step up to help to make things more accessible, even though it might not affect them directly.
Right. Well, I think the first thing that happens is all the people who don't have disabilities will become happier with their online experiences.
Okay.
One of the things that happens to me quite often is I will complain about something on LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever, thinking it's only an issue for a visually impaired person using a screen reader. And then I'll find out real quick that the sighted people hate X too. So, and of course, I didn't mean X, the platform. I mean X as in XYZ. So like 6-7 years ago, I wrote a post about trying to navigate Pinterest, and I was shocked by how many sighted people said, "Max, we don't know what we're doing there either." So I feel like one of the first things that would happen is everybody that doesn't have a disability would have a better, more enjoyable experience. Site owners would be more concerned about their customers, or at least as much concerned about them as they are about their profit and loss, because the two are definitely tied together. I feel like we would have more people employed by companies who have disabilities, and the people who don't have disabilities but have life challenges, like the nursing mother or somebody who's supporting an older parent or a child or a grandchild or both, would have the support they need. These are things that apply to disability as well as those who don't have a, quote, disability, unquote. I feel like we would take better care of our seniors, and there would be less stories on the news about them being scammed out of their life savings, because the cyber protections would also be accessible, which is, again, is something that would improve the lives of everybody who goes online, but especially those who are older and who are not as familiar with technology as others might be. I feel like the internet would be also much more welcoming as far as people with disabilities starting their own businesses, because right now a lot of the products and services I have to use either don't really exist, or they exist in forms that are not fully accessible, that are difficult to use. And there's always a possibility that a company that's willing to be accessible today will decide not to be accessible tomorrow, or get bought out by a larger company that doesn't have the same understanding about accessibility. So more welcoming to entrepreneurs, more products and services, more tools to help people like me run a business online.
Right.
I think there would be a lot of changes. And I would, with those improvements in the internet, hopefully we would see more content created by people with disabilities, or just by a wider group of voices than we have now. Right now, a lot of underrepresented voices are not being seen in front of or behind the cameras or the mics as much as other groups are. Those are things that could change if the internet became more accessible.
Right.
And of course, that doesn't even get to the in-person access. So, I went to Walmart this morning, and we went up a ramp in one of the side sections of the store, and my nephew goes to open the door in front of us, and the first thing I thought was, "Hey Seth, why do you have a ramp and then a door somebody has to open?"
Okay.
He said, "Well, Max, there are doors off to the other side from this ramp that open and close electrically." And I was like, I know people who live in wheelchairs, they wouldn't think that that's acceptable. And, people who are navigating those big, heavy carts probably don't think it's acceptable either. So, the fewer entrances and exits that have a ramp, and that are not only accessible but have easier access for people just trying to do business with that business.
Right. No, thank you for sharing that. I had such a wonderful time talking with you today. Thank you so much for your time. And just as we're wrapping up, what do you hope that people feel or do after listening to this conversation?
If they own a business or they have a website, I'm hoping that they will go visit their own website. And I'm not asking them to become an expert overnight, but a lot of times we don't visit our websites. We build them on the back end, or we pay people to build them, and we never test them. So I would say visit your own website. If you have a business that employs people, make an effort to actually speak to your employees. Get to know a few of them. If you're lucky enough to have somebody who has a disability, try to learn from them and use them to encourage other people in your workforce to share their challenges that are not necessarily disabilities. I hope that they will visit your website and check out the podcast and subscribe to listen to other episodes, or leave you a rating and a review, because a review is kind of like a comment on a blog, and those are very encouraging to us hosts. So I really hope that people will reach out to you and tell you how much they appreciate what you're doing with the podcast, because that doesn't happen very often for us. I know I'm supposed to have one set call to action, which would be the accessibilityadvantage.com, or Maxwell at the accessibilityadvantage.com. But, you asked me, the way you asked the question, there's so many answers, but I would say have a conversation with somebody who has a disability if you get the opportunity. Throughout the course of just for the rest of the day, when you go about your day, think about how would I feel if I were trying to do this in a wheelchair, or with a walker, or with a scooter, or how would I feel if I were trying to have this to communicate with this person of this business if I were deaf or hearing disabled, or navigating this website if I were dyslexic and had trouble comprehending because they didn't offer me the color or font palettes that I would prefer. Just
Right.
try to put yourself in other people's places for the rest of the day. And if you visit your podcast or my website, that'd be like a bonus.
No, thank you so much. I appreciate your kind words and just encouragement too. Again, thank you for your time. But just lastly, how can people find you if they'd like to connect with you?
Sure. They can go to the accessibilityadvantage.com.
Okay.
Maxwell at theaccessibilityadvantage.com. If they want to see some of my older stuff, they can go to theblindblogger.net.
Mm-hmm.
And I love for people to connect with me on LinkedIn, which I am Maxwell Ivey over there. And
Okay.
I'm really finding LinkedIn to be very enjoyable. People are actually reaching out and having conversations or introducing me to people with opportunities to educate others about accessibility. So those would be the ways for people to find me.
Okay.
And don't feel like you have to be ready to buy something from me, hire me, or book me to speak in order to talk to me. I love having unscripted conversations with people I don't know, because quite often those lead to some amazing experiences or opportunities.
Right. No, thank you. And, you're doing such incredible work, and I wish you all the best moving forward. And I'd love to stay connected with you too. But, thank you again for your time, and I hope that you have a good rest of your day.
Well, thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
Yeah.
Without people like you, the rest of the world wouldn't know who the heck I am, and I wouldn't be able to influence the people that I do. So thank you so much for that. I really enjoyed talking to you as well, and I hope we do stay in contact, and I wish you much continued success for your show.
Yeah, no, me too. And it really was my honor. Thank you for, sharing this platform with me. But yeah, I hope to talk to you again sometime soon.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for being here and tuning in to Voices That Propel Us, stories of justice, action, and community. Your presence in this movement matters. If today's conversation moved you, share it, talk about it, and keep the work going. Together, we're not just imagining change, we're making it. Until next time, stay bold, stay grounded, and stay in the fight.
Every time I feel so mad and sad and bad, I say to myself, relax, lean back, it's a brand new day. And every time I feel so down that a frown is all that's on my face, I remind myself to take a breath, it's a brand new day.